Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I have a great guest today, a neighbor, a friend, a colleague. Julia Pimsleur is the author of Go Big Now and the best-selling $1 Million Women. She's a master practitioner and coach of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. For those of you in the know that's all about NLP. And she's the founder of $1 Million Women social venture. Pimsleur also built the #1 language teaching company for kids. Now, what I love about Julia is she has taken her past experiences, her knowledge, what she has learned as a leader, and built it forward into a business. And as we talk woman to woman, she's always the woman who's looking forward and not just looking at now. So Julia, thanks for joining me here today.
Thanks, Ivy. I'm so excited for this conversation. Thanks for the lovely introduction.
So tell me a little bit how you got started.
Well, at first, I was actually a documentary filmmaker. That was my first career. I'm on career number 4 right now. And so I was a filmmaker for
I love that.
years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And, I feel like women don't talk about that enough, right? How to reinvent. So I proudly always tell people I'm on career number 4 because I'm actually proud of all that reinvention. So the first one was as a filmmaker. The second one was as a nonprofit fundraiser. And then when I was home on maternity leave with my first son, I had the idea to build the company Little Pim that became my multi-million-dollar language teaching company. And that led right into becoming a coach and doing what I do today at $1 Million Women.
So tell me a little bit about building the brand $1 Million Women. And I know you've been at this for a whole bunch of years as we've talked about this. What have you found in building this type of company versus something that's a very different marketplace than where you came from and something focused more for children?
Yes. And Little Pim was a pure for-profit company. We were selling a multimedia language teaching program to young children. And we were in 22 countries. We had 13 languages, venture capital backed. So pure profit, although we were also helping kids in developing countries learn English. That was some of our give back. And I come out of a long tradition of activism, of wanting to make social change. So I always found ways to integrate that. But now with $1 Million Women, it feels much more in line with my values in the sense that we are a pure social venture, which if people aren't familiar with that term, we're half for-profit, half nonprofit. So on the for-profit side, helping women with their businesses around the country, we specialize in helping women go from 100 or 200,000 to that $1 million mark faster. And then on the nonprofit side, we've been providing scholarships through our $1 Million Women Fund to women of color entrepreneurs who face even higher obstacles in scaling up their businesses.
And so in building this, it's a different marketplace. Because it's very interesting what we learn as we're growing businesses. I know when I transitioned from owning a printing company, moving into Slater Success, it was a different marketplace. And I think it's always interesting in staying in pulse to the marketplace. So what have you learned in the transitions for you in marketing, in building this type of business?
With Little Pim, we were a product business. So that was a whole different business model. We were selling to Barnes & Noble and Toys R Us and making licensing deals with, Leapfrog and Hulu and all kinds of large media companies. Now with $1 Million Women, we're a services business, but I decided early on I wanted it to be very scalable. I was never really interested in doing a lot of one-on-one coaching. One, I thought I would burn out, even though I love doing one-on-one coaching. I thought, how many women can I talk to every week without feeling like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore? And 2, I always wanted to really move the needle on how many women reach 1 million. Right now, it's 2 to 3% of women entrepreneurs get to 1 million and only 1% women of color. And those numbers really kept me up at night. And frankly, Ivy made me mad. That's really part of
I was going to say, bottom line, in 2 women here sitting and talking who both run $1 million businesses, it is in an impolite way pisses me off.
100%, right?
And it takes women to change.
Well,
And it
when
actually
we
takes
get
men
mad,
and
we
the
do
women to
something
create
about it,
change.
right? We
Yes.
get mad, we do something about it, or some of us do. You clearly do, and I do, right? So I try to use that fuel, right, to build our mission. But back to what you learned from the different businesses. So I ran the product business, and that was pure for profit. Now with the social venture, we have the two sides. And one thing I'm realizing is that when you have a services business, you can still scale it up like a product business. That's something I've been teaching in my programs. So we created services that were packaged up as products at Million Dollar Women. And that's allowed us to reach thousands of women instead of, a few hundred. So I think that having the product business actually served me well in thinking about the services business in a totally different way.
And so what do you see about like the future? Like we've gone through, we're coming out of navigating during this time of the pandemic. It's been an impact on business, impact on leaders, and a shifting in some ways of how we do business and how we show up as business women. What have you learned during this time?
Well, I think we're entering a time of unprecedented opportunity for entrepreneurs in general and women specifically. We are reinventing so many things right now, from how we travel to how we live to how we work. And all of that is going to call for new products and services and new ways of serving customers. And I think there's one thing that women are amazing at, and we're amazing at a lot of things, but one thing we've really excelled at is having our finger on the pulse of what customers need and want, and providing that. I think I don't like to be essentialist. I think there are men who have female qualities and women who have, or men who have feminine qualities and women who have traditionally considered masculine qualities. But I will say most women I know are fairly intuitive, right? And can sense where trends are going, can sense what customers want. So we have an opportunity to build thousands of businesses, $1 million businesses, if you and I have anything to do about it, in entering into these next 10 years. So I'm very hopeful and excited.
Share a little bit. There was some various unexpected times this past year, but what has in building this business in the last, about 5 years or so?
Yes, we just had our 5-year anniversary in January.
Okay. What has surprised you?
I think what surprised me is how hard it is for women to invest in themselves. I did go out and get a lot of business training when I was looking to grow Little Pim, the language teaching business, into a multi-million-dollar business. I realized that not having a finance background or a business background, that I just needed to round out my business skills. And so I joined a business program. I hired a coach. I went off to Harvard's executive education program. And my family has always been very focused on education. I grew up with that as a primary value. But I'm realizing in talking to thousands of women from across the country that women are not socialized to invest in themselves, not after college and grad school. If you've gotten through college and grad school, or maybe just college, right, you feel like you're done. And that's not true for men. Most of my male entrepreneur friends are much more likely to hire coaches, go do business programs, and really invest in themselves. So that's something I'm hoping to help change over the next decade, is for women to realize, if I want to grow my business, I need to invest in myself. And look, it doesn't have to be with me or with you, right? But they should find whoever the right fit is for them. But not investing in yourself is really shortchanging your opportunities.
I know recently I had a conversation and somebody said, well, they were kind of surprised that, like, well, I've used coaches and I still do. And they're like, really? Why? And my response was, well, if I didn't, I would focus all my energies on my clients 100,000% of the time. And I would forget to focus some of my energies on the growth of Slater's success as a brand in and of itself. So easy. And I think women by nature are such givers.
Yes.
And so we forget to look at ourselves. And I love what you're bringing out. And I think it's very true. Women as givers forget to invest in themselves. They think they are investing in ourselves when we do our weekly manicures or whatever that is. Yeah, I invest in myself. I do nice things for myself. I join a gym, I take a class, whatever that is. But truly investing in our biggest growth.
And in our career, right? Although we invest in our children, we invest in wardrobes, we invest in, our look, but really investing in what you have to offer as a professional, I think, is the most important thing that you can do. And it's also really betting on yourself, right? I know that when I took my first program, I thought, okay, I think it was $8,000 and it was like 10 years ago. And I didn't have that money, but I thought, all right, I'm going to put this on a credit card. And I'm going to learn whatever all these other people know, these high performing CEOs, and I'm as smart as them, right? So I'm going to learn it and I'm going to get great results. And that's what happened. But I think I was socialized that way by my mother and my family. My mother always said to me, Julia, whatever you do, you will succeed at. Now, that was not true at all, but she instilled me with this wonderful mindset that allowed me to take risks, right? And so I think part of the problem is women feeling like, well, it's money out the window or something, as opposed to an investment in yourself that you'll then make back in kind. I've always made the money back, tenfold that I've invested in myself.
I think I think what you're bringing out is so important, because I know the first time I invested heavily in a coach and in a program, and I was going to take that 8 times 2 or 3, actually, was year one. It was
it was a big investment. Yes.
And this company was not earning to that capacity at any means in those early days. And I remember looking at my husband and I said, I'm going to do this. And he's like, he just looked at me, and I had run a company for eons, and he's like, okay, if you what are your goals and your expectations? And I was like, well, based on, it was a business conversation. It was not a husband and wife conversation. It was 100% business conversation. What do you expect the investment to net out? What do you expect the ROI to be? How do this, that, and the other thing? And we had this very practical business conversation. It was never of, should I do it or shouldn't I do it? It was, I was sharing a business decision. And he's like, yeah, best of luck with whatever you're doing. Because we both ran businesses. It was both of the mindset, as you so love to talk about, of looking at, that as, and it was, for me, it was an investment. It was an investment in my growth. And I remember, before X amount of months was done, but by the 4th or 5th month, I was 2.5 timesing my revenue, because I made the decision with clear expectations. So I know one of your greatest strengths is you look how we look at things and the mindset we approach things with. Now, 2021 is a wild year. We've moved through a year of, shifting how we do business, shifting how we've lived our lives, and now the world is opening back up. Where does our mindset as business leaders come back into play?
Well, Ivy, we all just got the greatest mindset test there ever was, right? I mean, before the pandemic, I think the business world thought of mindset as sort of a nice to have soft skill. Like, okay, yeah, go work on that on your own time, but that's not going to help our business. But I think we all realized during the pandemic that having a powerful, resilient mindset was the number one thing you needed to master. I don't know about you as a coach, but I saw that my clients who kept working, succeeded, pivoted their businesses, made really tough decisions, went and got the loans. These were the people who had a powerful foundation, a really good mindset. And people who didn't, kind of got back under the covers and pulled it over their heads, at least for a little while. Sometimes it just took them a couple months to come out. And of course, if you had a family member who was ill or you were ill, that's not a mindset thing, right? That's like, our heart goes out to you. But for everyone else, I really saw that during the pandemic, there were 2 camps of people, right? People who were dealing with the illness and were deep in that world. And then the people who had to figure out, how do I get myself through this? So mindset, for me, the go big mindset, which I talk about in my new book, Go Big Now, is really a set of beliefs that allows you to stay positive, overcome any obstacle, and reach your goals. That's the go big mindset.
And I think that is ultimately important, because, the one thing, we saw we all set our business plans, we set our goals in the fall of the year before, right? You create your goals, you create any strategy, you create your action plans, that is how you set up your following year in business strategy. It's kind of like that.
And you're supposed to just be executing.
And you're supposed to execute. Then you come, to March of 2020. And, I know a lot of my clients are like, well, we created these great plans. Now what? And it was about not, and here's the mindset piece that I love what you talk about. It was not about, well, throw it all out with the bathwater. It's, okay, what do we know? And how do we respond to what we know to continue to execute, shift, or pivot?
Yes. And I'm sure that you helped so many people do that. And I know that for me, I felt so lucky that my kids are older, they're teenagers. I have 2 boys, I'm divorced, I live in New York for those listening. And I just felt so lucky that I didn't have young children at home. Since my kids were fine and doing school on their own, I turned all my attention to just coaching. So I was live coaching really every day during the pandemic. And I saw that the people who had the mindset practices that allowed them to look for opportunities, to stay positive, to not dwell on what was lost, which was in some cases everything, right? I had a lot of businesses in entertainment, in sports, in food that were closed down. If you focused on what you lost, right, you could become paralyzed very quickly. But that's a mindset practice. And, what I'm hoping to have happen coming out of my book, Go Big Now, is to give people really simple, practical tools to build a more powerful mindset, or a go big mindset, as I call it, because I think it's a big buzzword right now, mindset, but most people don't know what that is, or, okay, I should have a powerful mindset or a growth mindset, but how do I get that? And what do I do?
Yeah. So Julia, if you were to leave our listeners with one action, practical tip, what would it be in setting that up? What would you leave them to think about?
I would love listeners to make a commitment to be intentional about getting a powerful, resilient mindset, or a go big mindset, as I call it. And here's why. It's really the foundation on which you build your mansion. Just as you can't build a mansion on quicksand, you can't build a big successful company or a thriving career on a shaky mindset. And we as women especially have a tendency to undermine ourselves, get lost in negative self-talk, distort things we hear and take them personally and think it's about us. And so in my book, I shared these 8 mindset practices that allow you to build a more resilient, powerful mindset. So I'd love people to check that out, but also to continue that journey and read books that can help them have a more powerful mindset. It will pay off in every aspect of your life, professionally, personally, and in terms of happiness levels. And coming out of the pandemic, right? Who doesn't want to experience greater joy? We have a lot of time to make up for coming out of that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great tip. What you're giving is, it all starts with our mindset and how it trickles down into a ripple effect into everything we do and touch, from starting with our whole being, our families, our businesses.
And Ivy, we all take it for granted that we should work on our fitness, right? We go to the gym, we do yoga, we do bar, or whatever we do to have a solid core, a strong physical core. But you can actually build mindset core strength by doing certain exercises, by practicing gratitude, by journaling, by setting intentions, all things I talk about in Go Big Now. And I think we're seeing more people embrace that now post-pandemic, because I think wellness and business have met in a way that they might not have had we not lived through this year.
How can our listeners learn more about you?
They can go to my website, JULIAPIMSLEUR.com. That's PIMSLEUR. If they're looking to scale up a business, they can go to scalewithjulia.com. And please follow me on social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. It's just my name, @JuliaPimSLEUR. I'd love to hear from any of your listeners. And thanks for everything you're doing, Ivy, to help so many women succeed and live joyful, big lives.
Love it. Listeners, if you've been a regular on Her Success Story Week,
Anymore, 'cause I've got mine.